Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here in Donaldsonville in our historic courthouse on the night that its roof is leaking. So if you will forgive us for some of us being kind of moved around and displaced, there's water dropping on folks' desks. So if you're being leaked upon, please feel free to get up and move to a more dry location. I guess after all that has happened in Ascension Parish in the last couple of weeks, it is fitting that we would be here in a leaking building. It is June the 3rd. This is the regularly scheduled council meeting of the Parish Council, and I'd like to call that meeting to order by asking Coach Thomas if he would please lead us in the invocation, followed by the pledge. If you'll all stand.
Think about a new courthouse, Mr. Terry. Quiet. Let's bow our heads. Most Heavenly Father, this hour in the evening as we gather together here tonight, we ask, Lord, that you give us the strength to continue to move this parish of Ascension forward. We pray, Lord, that you allow us to agree to disagree tonight. We pray, Lord, that you would bless each and every person under the sound of my voice. Lord, we pray, Lord, that you would allow us to strengthen and gather ourselves and allow us to get self out the way and to move forward and to take care of the people of this parish. I pray, Lord, that you would bless and keep us, bless our families. And Lord, this has been a hell of a 2 years, a dramatic 2 years, a year and 5 months, a year and 6 months. We thank you, Lord, for allowing us to make it through. And Lord, we know, Lord, that tough times don't last, but tough people do. And we are those tough Ascension Parish people that we are. We pray, Lord, that you guide and lead us in a mighty way. And thank you so much for everything you've done for us and all that you will do. We ask this in your name, Jesus. And as we leave this place tonight, we ask that each of us make it home safe and sound to our families. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pray allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Coach. Councilman Turner has not arrived. Councilman Melanson is unable to attend tonight. He has work obligations. There are no chair's additions. If you have a comment that you would like to make on any item on the agenda, please take a red or a green card, get that to the council secretary. She's going to get that up here to me, and we will call on you at the appropriate time. I'm going to caution folks to please sign your card, bring your own card to the secretary so that there is not any loss of your card. We want you to be able to have your time, and we want to make sure that your card gets to us. Thank you so much. I want to take just a second to introduce and welcome two gentlemen that happen to be seated in the house. I was surprised to find them outside, and so I want to welcome Iberville Parish's president, Mr. Mitch Urso, and his CAO, Mr. Edward Sanji, who is a relative, I understand it, of our own Donald Sanji. So we are thrilled to have you guys with us. Thank you so much. Item 5, the parish president's report.
Madam Chair, I have a document that I'd like to give to the parish president at this time. Do I have your permission to approach you?
Absolutely. Mr. President, you're free to deal with that at another time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it has been a traumatic 2 weeks, as Councilman Thomas indicated. So I'm going to keep my parish president's report pretty short, pretty sweet. I just want to send out a shout out to our DPW workers. A lot of them in groups have been working overtime. A lot have been working in the rain. 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 A lot have been working in I noticed because I was there with them a lot through this, not all the time, but I can tell you, visiting the sites, they've been certainly putting in a time. Tired, weary as the weeks drag on, but they have been up to the task. And something happened today that taught me, it just brought me back to what makes this parish so great. And we had an anonymous donor treat our DPW workers who worked overtime, and those group, over 40 meals was donated at San Marcos Fire Department for our employees. And these people or person wanted to remain anonymous, and I just thought what a great gesture, and what really makes this parish great. And so I just want to thank them, those individuals, whoever they are, and again, I would just like to thank our parish employees for all that they do day in and day out. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And our thanks to that donor as well on behalf of the council. We understand the desire for anonymity, but we'd all love to be able to thank that individual personally or that business. So thank you, whoever you might be. We are struggling a little bit here, and I'm trying to avoid calling this meeting for tonight. We have a fairly significant agenda, and I would like to get through it. It may become necessary to not do that. But at this moment, we're going to try to proceed, if that's okay with you, gentlemen. All right, very good. Item 6 is presentations. We have a presentation by our legal counsel tonight, just some comments that were made that will help us to better understand moratorium. We have some folks who want to comment on that item. So, Kenneth, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and let those folks speak first, and then the floor will be yours. Miss Christina Guidry.
Good evening. I came here to the meeting for a different purpose than what I'm speaking, but I looked on the agenda and I saw the 9T on the, I'm going to hurry and move to it, you guys can look for it, additional funds for the youth center and rehabilitation programs, and I just kind of wanted to add my approval to this. I have not read the ordinance, but prior to moving to Louisiana, I worked for Davis Behavioral Health, and they were kind of leading, I would say leading edge in a lot of the country of things in mental health. We had a lot of programs in the schools. We had parenting classes, anger management, which now they managing emotions, just a bunch of classes, and we worked with them through the schools and also at the mental health agency. And the purpose is to kind of as a prevention. You help manage emotions and conflict resolution before it becomes a problem, and those things become part of the language of children as they grow up. And so I would love to see the parish move in those directions to provide these services to the public, parenting classes and so forth. We've seen test scores raised for the children that are learning these mindfulness techniques in the school. What we would do is we would teach them to the counselors in the school, who would then teach the teachers, and they would have, the whole schools would implement this, and they were seeing a lot of really good results. And so if the parish is moving in that direction, I just want to give kudos and anything to move with prevention. I just wanted to give my support. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Ms. Guidry, we'll keep your name.
Yeah, please do.
That is an important thing to us as well, and it's going to need some folks. Yes, okay, moving on, Ms. Denise Draga.
Good evening. My name is Denise Drago, and I'm here tonight to represent a lot of people that could not make this meeting tonight, but will be watching at home. So hello, everyone. I did keep my word. We would like you to know drainage is one of the most important issues that the people of Ascension are facing. This needs to be addressed and resolved before any more developments are approved. We hope all of you will represent all of us as you are elected to do and be the voice of the people of Ascension Parish and not the developers. We are hoping all of you can work together with our parish president to resolve the drainage issues the people of Ascension have faced for too long. Let's stop flooding Ascension Parish residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Drago. That is all the speakers. Had Mr. Dennis Drago here in support, but did not care to speak. Thank you. All right, Kenneth? Mike?
I was tasked with basically just looking up the laws on moratoriums and to give a brief overview of, if anything, that a moratorium, like what's required, I guess. And the documents that I've used to form my opinion and discuss is, first, there was a September 7th, 2000 AG opinion that was actually done on behalf of the parish, opinion number 00226, that addressed moratoriums. I started with that, and the AG opinion states that as long as the parish acts in a manner that best promotes health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, and general welfare, as well as efficiency in the economy and the process of development, and that those items are well-founded, then a moratorium can be in place. However, a moratorium needs to be specific as to what it addresses. It also has to have a limited time as well, and that the goal that is to be achieved by the moratorium is one that can be achieved. And what I've done as well, there isn't a lot of case law out there. I found a couple of cases that basically stated the exact same thing that the AG opinion stated. I've also reviewed moratoriums that have been placed in St. Tammany Parish as well as the city of Slidell, and they all address the moratoriums in the same way. They address the same issues, and they are very specific and time limited, and for a specific purpose. As long as those moratorium, an ordinance for moratorium meets those criteria, it is legal, it is valid.
Thank you very much, Mr. DuPatti. Do members of the council have any questions of Mr. DuPatti? Mr. Ogeron?
Yes.
Turn it on.
There we go. Now it works. Fantastic. Specific goal can be achieved. How generalized are we allowed to describe what this goal is going to be?
Not very general. It's, I forget the case. There's a very case on point that describes your issue. It's Manheim versus Harrison City. And there's also Summerall versus Phillips. Both address that issue, and it has to be specific. Cannot be vague. It didn't give exactly how specific you had to be, but the way they read it is that it has to be able to be understood by a general person in the public to understand exactly what the moratorium does.
Okay. And does the moratorium allow us to pick winners and losers in the construction industry? And the reason I'm asking is I understand the initial proposals that we were receiving would have disregarded family partitions or may have disregarded other actions, and that we were specifically looking at developers. And when I say developers, my take on what was intended was anyone who's building a subdivision in excess of 100 homes, let's say, okay? Or that's, the size of the lots are smaller than X. Does a moratorium allow the parish to pick and choose winners and losers in that sense?
I didn't look at that question specifically.
Okay.
However, what I would say is, as long as it can be shown that it falls within, that it meets the health, safety, morals, convenience, et cetera, then I think it is allowed.
So the litmus test is something that we determine as a council, send it out there, subject to the approval of a district court. I'm guessing would be the...
I wouldn't say, only if someone brings it, challenges it. But I think as long as it can be articulated, the reason that you're doing it, and it falls under those guidelines,
Okay.
you're okay.
Did you know how close we're to meeting those goals, those objectives, in drafting our document?
I don't.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate all the work you've done on this.
Any other questions? Mr. Lawler?
I have a question or two. I was trying to find my copy of the moratorium. I don't have it in front of me. I couldn't find it. But my concern was the goals that can be achieved. If I remember, some of the goals were somewhat nebulous and vaguely written, and certainly could not have been achieved within the time period of 6 months. Something such as, looking at retention ponds is one thing. We can always look and determine, do we need retention ponds? But building retention ponds cannot be done within 6 months, a year, probably even 3, 4, 5 years. When you say that can be achieved, does that mean that the actual result has to be achieved? Or do we have to have specific goals that can be achieved within that 6-month timeline?
Or 12?
Correct. Such
Or
as
12 months? I think is it 12? 12.
it's whatever y'all decide, I guess. Yes, it's not actually the goals of, say, the retention ponds and such. The goals such as, I believe there's a master plan. One of the reasons for the moratorium is to complete a master plan. That has to be achievable within the time period. Things of that nature.
Okay. So if we review and revise the drainage impact study for subdivisions, that would have to be able to be done within 6 months?
Or whichever time,
A year.
the moratorium, yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
I will say as well that even though it doesn't meet, I've seen there's a case, I think it's, or not a case, but in Slidell, I think it is, they started a moratorium originally for 6 months, and they weren't able to meet the goals in 6 months, and they were able to amend and add an additional 6 months to the moratorium. So that is something that is also available.
Yeah, that's something that actually I put out there. That's why I keep saying 6 months. I've always viewed it as you do it for 6 months, and then you can add monthly after that if it's still necessary,
Correct.
Because I remember that one from Slidell that was the deal, is, hey, 6 months as long as you can do it from its inception, and then you add on from there. And I wasn't sure if that was enforceable, but it looks like we have some good options in front of us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Robert?
I just wanted to address the same issue of the specific goals and being able to accomplish those specific goals. I feel that if we direct our goals more ordinance-oriented or more project-oriented, like you're talking about revising any of your plans or master drainage plans, even if we put some benchmarks out there to make decisions on that, or feasible decisions. We don't have to finish the whole master plan, but we can say, okay, we want this done, this done, this done. Can we be less specific in that sense, or does it have to actually complete a physical project? Ordinances and just ideas are good, right?
I think it's whatever the council decides is the reason or the purpose for the moratorium.
So a sensible reason would be to put specific ordinances in place to address traffic studies and to address drainage and to address the master plan, for
Correct.
instance. That wouldn't be too general?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions, gentlemen? I don't hear any more. Thank you very much. And I failed to mention that I had a red card here, slipped away from me over there. And that is Melissa Parmalee, who did not wish to speak but wanted to let us know that she was not in favor.
Oh, that was actually on 9L.
Is that on
That's
9?
why I saved it. Yeah, it said 9L. So I wasn't sure if that was,
Forgive me, Melissa.
oh, 9H?
9H? Well, just wait just a
Sorry.
minute till we get to that one. Okay, very good. I thought that one was, I apologize. All righty, thank you very much, Mr. DePatie, we appreciate your effort. Item 7, general business. Item 7A, approval of a bid, the official journal, Gonzales Weekly. Ms. Cynthia LeBlanc.
Good evening.
Good evening,
Right to
Cynthia.
act as official journal for Ascension Parish government. On May 27, 21, the purchasing department received one bid for the right to act as official journal for Ascension Parish. Bid was submitted by Gonzales Weekly Citizen. After review, the Ascension Parish Council Secretary recommends accepting the bid submitted by Gonzales Weekly Citizen and to place it on the Ascension Parish Council consent agenda on Thursday, June 3rd.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Robert, a second by Mr. Ogeron to approve. Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. B, approval to waive development fees for Hidden Lake subdivision, first and second filing pursuant to Section 18-117.2 of the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinances. I have a motion by Mr. Lambert. Second. Anywhere, gentlemen?
Here.
Mr. Travis Turner. Are there any questions?
The trash can, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Ogeron.
We got the trash can blocking us.
Look through the documentation on this. Why are we offering to waive development fees for this particular subdivision?
Corey, turn your
Mic on, please. For the same reason, sir, that we have been,
Okay, I'll repeat my question for those people who just texted me saying we can't hear you. Why are we waiving that development fee? Is that standard, or what are we?
yes, that has been our standard practice since
Okay.
the sewer ordinance was put.
Fantastic, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. Item C, approval of a change order, new substation 51, Galvez Lake, Blunt General Contractors. Decrease in dollar amount of $3,512.98.
Motion.
Have a motion by Mr. Cagnolati, a second by Mr. Mason to approve. Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number D, letter D, approval of a substantial completion. New substation 51, same general contractor.
Motion.
Have a motion by Mr. Michael Mason, a second by Mr. Cagnolati. Are there any questions? Any of, yes, sir, please, Mr. Lambert.
Everyone that was working on the project, and it's a nice looking substation, and, but I want to thank everyone for putting in all the hard work.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. E, discussion of the PUA and ACUD number 1, Consolidated Utilities District number 1 billing. This was Mr. Coach Thomas's item for the agenda. Mr. Coach?
Thank you, Chair Lady Gazo. I often want to say to just remind Ms. Gazo that if you mind, that you don't interrupt me in my conversation that I'm about to explore. I
It's not my intention, Coach.
I appreciate it, but it has been in the past that
I
I
apologize.
have been interrupted, and I would ask that you don't. First, I'd like to let the public, we're talking about PUA and ACUD 1, to let the public make sure that the general public understand the position with the water company that we have here in Donaldsonville. It was something that we inherited with this council, and we've been having consistent, inconsistent water bills within the PUA and the ACUD 1, and it's been extremely difficult for my constituents to deal with. I've had an $18,000 water bill, went out to check it, there was no water. they cut it down to 2,100 to make it seem as though if it was a difference. I'm asking for someone to explain that to me. How do you get an $18,000 water bill and come back to this young person and give them $2,100? And also, I also would like to just remind that this item was brought to the utilities before it came here, which I couldn't, I was refused to put it on the utility agenda with the chairman for utilities. He decided not to put it on, so I had to acknowledge to try and get it on here to try and get some answers. And it seemed as though I don't have any answers. Is there anyone here to talk on the situation? Explain to me, explain to this council, explain to the general public, how do you get an $18,000 water bill?
Evening, Council. How are y'all? So, Councilman Thomas, I have been advised that this is a matter that is being investigated. It's in the hands of our auditors. We are analyzing the data. We haven't gotten any information back, so at this point in time, there's no real information that we can provide you pending the investigation.
Why couldn't that been said? Why couldn't you have said that when I inquired or requested about the water bill? It would have been very simple than me bringing it here to the council to get an answer. I've constantly been talking with this administration, and specifically Mr. President, trying to work and being able to communicate with the administration and with the president. And also, we're talking about transparency. And I know this is something that we ran on, transparency and communication. And personally, I should say, I do not direct or attempt to supervise any employee, anyone. I have a request, I make the request that is a concern to the parish residents on roads, also water leaks. If I can't communicate with the administration or with Mr. President on the immediate needs for the residents, then I have to say communication without communicating with our residents. I'm not sure how can we help to move this parish forward? And we talk about transparency. That was something we ran on, transparency and communication. We have to communicate. I have to communicate. I need help on the West Ascension side of Donaldsonville. We need help, and in order to do that, we have to communicate. So I'm not sure how long this is going to last. Without communicating, we can't move forward if you don't have any communication. No transparency. Without communication, you don't have transparency. We need to move this parish forward. And I am very, very disappointed in my first 15 months of being here, being disrespected and every so else. I've about had enough of it. We're going to communicate, we're going to move this parish forward, and we're going to do the best that we can. You have one of the best parishes in the state of Louisiana. You have your leader, don't want to communicate.
Point of order.
That is absurd.
Let's go ahead and.
That is absurd.
Are you finished, Mr. Thomas?
Am I gonna get an answer?
Yep.
Yeah.
Diaz ain't the president. Diaz, not the president. The people elected the president to do his job. If he don't want to do his job, then we need to look at doing something else. Diaz is not the president. I don't want to hear nothing from you, Mr. Diaz.
Point of order.
Point of order. For the fact of the matter is, we spoke 3 times yesterday, Coach, where I informed you, the second I found
I
out
do
that
not
this was on the
want to hear
ballot,
nothing from you, Mr.
we
Diaz.
talked 3 times.
I do not want to hear.
And it was explained to you, and to defend this administration and our efforts in Donaldsonville, in 16 months, we have moved $5.6 million to address the #1 problem in this, on the West Bank, and that's early childhood education. And I've spent more time with you going back and forth to the Thibodeau Wellness Center. We've literally had 3 conversations yesterday. You want to talk about communication? Nobody informed me that they were even requesting anything about this audit. Somebody came into my office and said, dude, what's this about? I had no idea. The audit was not even ready. Nobody even bothered to ask, where are we on this audit? It's a complicated audit, and it's an investigation. It's a legal issue. So to the point that you had to bring this up today, this problem was solved yesterday at 3:58, because I informed you that as soon as we get this audit, I would bring it to you. And so that's what happened yesterday.
That don't make it any better, Mr. Diaz.
Doesn't make it any worse.
This has been 15 months of the same foolishness. No communication, no transparency. You can't run a government without communication. You have to communicate. And if you're not going to communicate, then this thing is not going to happen. It doesn't matter.
Are we ready to move on, gentlemen? Let's see if I can find my spot now.
Matter of fact,
Yeah.
Senator here. Give that to Mr. President. Pass that to Ms. Terry.
Thank you. Item F, approval of a local declaration of emergency to fast-track the bid process pursuant to Louisiana Revised Statutes 38-22.1A5A for the Ascension Parish jail chillers, which have been declared unrepairable. And who's going to be addressing that issue this evening? Hi, Dean.
How you doing, Mr. Chairman?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I gave Mr. John Paul a letter from CMC who came out on emergency Saturday a couple of weeks ago and did an assessment and the best they could to repair them chillers. And we got a letter basically saying the chillers are 35, 45 years old. They are knocking. We having to put water on them, keep them cool. I mean, they need to be replaced.
I have a motion, I didn't hear who that was, by Mr. Robert, a second by Mr. Lawler. Are there any questions? Yes, Mr. Ogeron.
These chillers, that's the AC
Yes,
at the jail?
yes.
Is there any way we can add, we can amend this item to include an emergency repair of the courthouse AC as well?
That's up to
We
y'all.
don't have any AC in here tonight either.
I understand.
Again, Dean, I was joking with you. I vote to approve it, but yes, ma'am.
No, let us use that AC in there, I bet.
So we have a motion and a second. If there are any further questions or jokes anybody wants to make? If not, that motion passes. Or, I forgot to ask you if you object.
No.
I didn't think you did. That motion passes. Thank you, Dean. Appreciate your work. Item 8, introduction of ordinances. A, introduction of an ordinance to amend the Ascension Parish zoning map from medium intensity residential to small plan unit development zoning review ID-PZ 2621.21, tract A3 for Stephen and Cheryl Morrow, located on the south side of West Main Street, approximately 2,200 feet west of North Anita Avenue.
Motion.
Have a motion by Mr. Lawler to introduce. Remind you, gentlemen, that it only takes one. B, introduction of an ordinance to amend the Ascension Parish Unified Land Development Code, Appendix 211, Development Code, Section 17-2039, Industrial Overlay Zone, to to amend maps only.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Lawler to introduce. Introduction of an ordinance. C, to amend an ordinance adopted on November 7th, 2019, to create prospective precincts by the split and/or merger of precinct geography in accordance with Louisiana Revised Statute 18:532 and 18:532.1 to add alpha splits as required.
Motion.
Have a motion by Mr. Cagnolati to introduce. Item number 9, public hearings of ordinances. Item A, reading of an ordinance to declare surplus and authorize the sale and/or transfer of miscellaneous movable equipment to Prevost Memorial Hospital pursuant to an intergovernmental agreement attached hereto and made a part hereof. Mr. DuPatti.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Purpose, to declare surplus and authorize the sale and/or transfer of miscellaneous movable equipment pursuant to an intergovernmental agreement attached hereto and made a part hereof. Whereas the parish of Ascension has certain assets that is surplus and no longer viable to retain, and whereas these assets no longer serve or have any public purpose, and whereas the parish of Ascension desires to declare said assets as surplus and provide for the sale and/or transfer of same, whereas be it ordained by the Ascension Parish Council, acting in its capacity as the governing authority, that it hereby declares the listing of assets attached hereto and made a part hereof as Exhibit A, as surplus, and authorizes the sale and/or transfer of some to Prevost Memorial Hospital as is and without warranty of any kind for the terms and conditions set forth in the intergovernmental agreement attached hereto and made a part hereof as Exhibit B. Severability. In the event that any portion of this ordinance is ever held invalid or unconstitutional for any reason by any court of competent jurisdiction over it, such portion shall be deemed a separate, distinct, and independent provision and shall not affect the validity of the remaining portions of the ordinance. Effective date, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect as permitted by law, the ordinance having been submitted to a vote.
Motion.
Chair would entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Robert, second by Mr. Cagnolati to open the public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing.
Second, have a motion by Mr. Lawler, second by Mr. Ogeron to close the public hearing. Chair would entertain a motion to move the ordinance. Have a motion by Councilman Turner to move the ordinance. Are there any questions? Any objections?
Oh, we need a second.
Well,
Do we get
I
a
thought I
second?
had one. Thought I had one.
John? Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I guess
I
I
didn't hear
just, and I probably
I
didn't
was
repeat
about to
it.
give it, but
That's okay. I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item E, public hearing, reading of an ordinance to declare surplus and authorize the sale and transfer of miscellaneous movable equipment, furniture, files, and cabinets. Mr. DuPatti.
Purpose, to declare surplus and authorize the sale and/or transfer of miscellaneous movable equipment. Parish of Ascension has certain assets that is surplus and no longer viable to retain, and whereas these assets no longer serve or have any public purpose, and whereas the Parish of Ascension desires to declare said assets as surplus and provide for the sale and/or transfer of same, whereas be it ordained by the Ascension Parish Council acting in its capacity as the governing authority, that is hereby declares the listing of assets attached hereto and made a part hereof as Exhibit A as surplus and authorizes the sale and/or transfer of same. Severability. In the event that any portion of this ordinance is ever held invalid or unconstitutional for any reason by any court of competent jurisdiction over it, such portion shall be deemed a separate, distinct, and independent provision and shall not affect the validity of the remaining portions of the ordinance. Effective date, this ordinance shall be in full effect as permitted by law. The ordinance having been submitted to vote, the vote thereon was as follows.
Motion to open public hearing. Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Cagnolati and a second by Councilman Robert to open the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
I have a motion by Councilman Robert, second by Councilman Ogeron to close the public hearing.
Motion to move.
Have a motion by Councilman Robert to move the ordinance.
Second.
Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item G, reading of an ordinance to amend Chapter 19, Transportation Impact Fee, Section 19, 51D, Transportation Impact Fee. There are some speakers on this item.
do we read first?
Right.
Does he read it first?
I
And then
will.
we-
This
I can read the ordinance first.
Do you want to read it first, or would you rather, I mean, I don't care which order we do it in.
I think I probably should read it first.
Okay, please read it first then.
Purpose, to amend Chapter 19, Roads and Other Public Ways, Article 4, Transportation Impact Fees, Section 19-51A1, Establishment of Transportation Impact Fee Schedule of the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinances. Whereas in March 2017, Duncan and Associates completed a transportation impact fee study for Ascension Parish using a consumption-based model, which proposes to charge a new development the cost of replacing the capacity that is consumed on the major roadway system. And whereas the Parish of Ascension determined that it is in the best interest of the citizens of Ascension Parish to establish the transportation impact fees to assist in the mitigation of the transportation impact of the rapid growth on the transportation network within Ascension Parish. And whereas the Parish of Ascension adopted an ordinance on June 1st, 2017, amending the transportation impact fee ordinance based on the above study. Now therefore be it ordained by the Ascension Parish Governing Authority of the Parish of Ascension, State of Louisiana, Chapter 19, Roads, Bridges, and Other Public Ways, Article 4, Transportation Impact Fees, Section 1951A1, Establishment of Transportation Impact Fee Schedule, be amended and supplemented as further described in Exhibit A attached here to and made a part hereof. Repeal all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith are hereby and henceforth repealed. Severability, if any provision of this ordinance is held to be invalid, such invalidity shall not affect other provisions herein which can be given effect without the invalid provisions, and to this end, the provisions of this ordinance are hereby declared to be severable. Effective date.
Motion to open public hearing.
That makes sense.
I'll second that.
I must have stage fright tonight for some reason. I can't get anything right. So we have a motion by Councilman Robert and a second by Councilman Lawler to do the appropriate thing, open the public hearing, and invite the speakers to speak. Mr. Nathan Spicer, please.
Hello, council members. Good to see y'all again. I've been a parish resident since 2004, as you know. I'm also a custom home builder since 2002. But I'm sure y'all are aware right now, housing is ridiculous, 67% below inventory of last year. We have 1.1 months of housing in Ascension Parish right now. So that is a nationwide problem as well. Costs are ridiculous. I don't know if y'all heard, lumber's traded on the stock market last year this time. It's sold by the board foot. Last year it was $400 per board foot. Right, a couple weeks ago it hit $1,600 per board foot, all-time high. We're having the same experience everybody else is having. Nobody wants to work, shortage of labor, materials, shipping, everything. And so what's happening is, I'm building a house right now in Convent, Louisiana. It's $183 a foot. Doesn't include a lot, just the house in Convent. And it's because all these costs are just skyrocketing. Copper went up, doubled last month. Sheetrock's going up 10% this month. And so the biggest problem for people buying new or used houses or resales is the appraisals. So they can't get their appraisals where they need to be, because people are bidding on these houses, and 5 or 6 people are bidding 10,000 above asking price. But then when they go to closing, they can't get the appraisals. And so we keep adding costs because nationwide, the materials and stuff are the raw materials and such are costing us so much. So I understand the need for transportation fees. I drive on Ascension Parish roads every day, fighting traffic. I know we need them, but I just would like to ask y'all to maybe wait a little time before we increase costs, because we're getting costs from everywhere, so that we can look at it in a more stable environment. We definitely going to need transportation improvements, no doubt. But it's just that we're getting hit by every single material, every single labor, because the material costs are going up. And so in Baton Rouge right now, a friend of mine's building a spec house, not a real big house. It's $250 a foot. That's because the price of a lot, lumber, etc. I bid a house the other day in St. James Parish. The lumber alone was $137,000. That's just stick lumber. That's no windows, no doors, no nothing. And $137,000, the biggest lumber price I ever got. So I'm just asking y'all to help what y'all can, at least temporarily. I think next year we'll be a lot better off, and we can look at it and say, oh, okay, prices are coming down, appraisals are getting closer, etc. But I implore y'all to do that, and I really appreciate y'all listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spicer. I have 2 other individuals who are here who had red cards but did not desire to speak. Melissa Parmalee and Karen Zita. Chair would entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Have a motion by Councilman Turner, a second by Councilman Lawler to close the public hearing. Chair,
Motion, motion to move the ordinance.
I have a motion by Mr. Lawler to move the ordinance, second by Mr. Mason. Are there any questions? Yes. Mr. Lambert.
What I'd like to do is amend the motion to leave the traffic impact fees at 70% and go up to the 80% in 12 months, all when the moratorium is lifted. I just want to let everyone know, not only is the parish coming out of COVID, the state is coming out of COVID. And, this hurts everyone. And, I mentioned this in transportation. I think the right thing to do is let's move together, all of us together, when things get a little bit better. But, I'd like to keep it at the 70%, and then we'll move to the 80 in a year and look at it.
And you're doing that in a form of a substitute motion?
Substitute motion, yes, ma'am.
Do you have a second?
I just wanted to add to
And
that.
a second by Mr. Ogeron. If you have do you have a comment, Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you
Mr.
were talking.
Robert?
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
okay.
I would be more apt to accepting or to agreeing to that if we could up, instead of to 80% in 12 months. I mean, I get prices are sky high, COVID, all of that, but we got to make up that difference. Let's say we could move it to 90 or 100% in 12 months, so we're not staying back. You know, I feel like the economy and everything should be back enough. They should be able to do 90 to 100% if we grant this 12-month stay at 70%.
Mr. Ogeron?
Thank you. I would propose to Councilman Robert, possibly what we can do is revisit this a year from now. So rather than tying our hands to 100% impact fee today, why don't we agree to keep it at the 70%, knowing full well that we can bring this back up in a year from now, once this moratorium is passed, once the conditions in the industry are resolved, so that we'll have more stats, we'll have more information, rather than just hypothesizing what may happen in a year. Why don't we, would you agree it would be smarter to just wait until we have all the info?
I'd like to at least set the benchmark at 90%, and the same way that you're saying, we can revisit it, and if for some reason 90% looks too high and we're not back at that point, we can lower it back to 80%. Kind of meet in the middle.
Interesting. Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Lawler?
First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Spicer for coming. He's one of my constituents, and I do appreciate his concerns. I'm not ignoring that there is an issue with cost of building, the cost of houses. We see it all the time. A little bit of facts, though, on a 30-year mortgage, which is the most common mortgage that is used in America today. On a house less than 2,000 square feet, the cost per month would go up 86 cents. On a 2,000 to 2,999 square foot house, the cost per month would go up 90 cents. And on a 3,000 square foot house, and anything larger, which is extremely large in my opinion, you're talking 95 cents a month. I don't think people are buying houses based on 85, 90 cents a month. We need this money in transportation. We hear about it all the time. We need infrastructure. And we just finished 3 projects on Old Jefferson. We spent over $2.1 million of transportation impact fees on those projects. Within the past couple of years, we've been able to take transportation impact fees, move them to projects, thus allowing us to leverage other money to get federal funds, and we're able to match with other money, which has really improved what we've been able to do. So these traffic impact fees are important, and they're getting things done all over the parish. But I understand what Mr. Spicer's saying, that there is a cost issue here. So my thought, and just hear me out on this, is that we delay the implementation of the 80% until December 31st of 2021. That's approximately 6 months from now. And in return, what we do is, so we don't have to keep revisiting this every single year, we then, a year later, December 31st of 2022, we go to 90%, and then December 31st, 2023, we go to 100%. That way, the builders can plan on it, they know it's coming, We've delayed it 6 months, which will get, I understand the problem there, but it also, it doesn't come back to us every year and to have to rehash the same old thing. We get to where we are and then we move on from there. That's, I'll make a substitute motion that we do that, and
Oh, let's hang on. We have one substitute motion on the floor already, so let's deal with that one.
I guess I
So,
could amend that one, but
I will withdraw.
Mr. Lambert would like to withdraw his substitute motion. And so, Aaron, if you will you please repeat what is now the only substitute motion?
yes, that we will delay implementation of the 80% fee collection to December 31st, 2021. And then on December 31st, 2022, we'll go to 90%. And then on December 31st, 2023, we move to 100%.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Lambert and a second by Mr. Mason. I need to ask a question of Mr. Fournier. Is Jerome? Jerome, how does this work with I think annually we do some work toward these fees. So if you would address this issue, please.
Madam Chair, yes, every year by ordinance, we have to come to you and adjust the fees based on the cost of construction index, and we did that this year. That index indicated that this year we're going up 1.34% from the prior year's rate. When we updated the program in 2017, we came back with a new fee schedule, and it was at that time in 2017 that the council decided that they didn't want to levy 100% of the fee. And it was negotiated that we approve the fee at 100%, but we're only levying it on the East Bank at 70% and on the West Bank at 35%, right? So if we want to do that, you certainly can as a council and modify the fees midway. But every year at this time, we have to come back and at least do the cost of construction index increase, or decrease for that matter, and it did go down 1 year.
Thank you for your input, sir. I appreciate that. So, any questions over here? Mr. Wagasback.
No, I was just going to suggest for the administration, it might also be a good idea as we listen to the home builders talk about what their costs are doing. I think we should be willing to do a presentation on what it cost us to maintain however many miles of road we have. What we're not being, as people are screaming for infrastructure, let's tell that story. What do we get in taxes? What do we get in impact fees? Where are we spending it? So we look at the other side of the coin of our increase in costs and our increase in labor to do these things. So that would just be a request for the Transportation Committee, maybe to have you guys come and present that budget in that case and what that looks like for us and what challenges we're having to keep up with. So that's the only comment I had.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to approve a substitute motion. Are there any further questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Fournier. Item J, reading of an ordinance to amend the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinances, Chapter 19, Article 1, Section 19.6, to require an 18-month maintenance bond to secure infrastructure improvements within a new subdivision and to clean up existing language.
Purpose, to amend Chapter 19, Roads, Bridges, and Other Public Ways, Article 1, in General Section 19-4, Acceptance of Roads and Streets and New Developments, inspections generally, samplings and testing required, and Section 19-6, same, final inspection, corrective work, resolution of acceptance of the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinances. Whereas the Parish of Ascension desires to align this section of its Code of Ordinances with the 18-month maintenance bond to secure the infrastructure improvements within a new subdivision as provided for in the Unified Land Development Code, Section 17-4010, and whereas the Parish of Ascension wishes to remove language referencing the former police jury form of government, now therefore be it ordained by the Ascension Parish Governing Authority of the Parish of Ascension, State of Louisiana, Chapter 19, Roads, Bridges, and Other Public Ways, Article 1, in General Section 19.4, Acceptance of Roads and Streets and New Developments, inspections generally, samplings and testing required, and Section 19-6, same, final inspection, corrective work, resolution of acceptance be amended and supplemented as further described in Exhibit A attached here to it and made a part hereof. Repeal all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith are hereby and henceforth repealed. severability. If any provision of this ordinance is held to be invalid, such invalidity shall not affect other provisions herein which can be given effect
Motion to
without.
open public hearing.
I have a motion by Mr. Robert, a second by Mr. Cagnolotti to open a public hearing. I thought he was.
Did you finish reading it?
He
Okay.
was
Thank you, sir. Second.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to close
Motion
the
to
public
close
hearing.
public hearing.
Have a motion by Councilman Lawler,
Second.
second by Councilman Mason to close the public hearing. Chair would entertain a motion to move the ordinance. Have a motion by Councilman Cagnolotti to move the ordinance. Are there any questions? Mr. Ogeron.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone here that can speak on behalf of why 18 months is the proper period of time? Jerome? Thank you.
Councilman Ogeron, when a developer builds a subdivision and we actually file the final plat, making legal lots out of it, they've already put in the infrastructure, we require them to put up an 18-month bond to guarantee that the work that they've done is as adequate, and if any, during that 18-month period, if we find some inadequacies, we touch base with them, they fix it. If they don't, we have the ability to call the bond. It's like an insurance policy.
Right.
A couple of years ago, we changed it. It used to be a 12-month bond. Now it's an 18-month bond because we wanted that extra duration and time. But this language just cleans up another part of the ordinance that references the bonds and all this. So we wanted to get everything in sync in terms of, we now have an 18-month bond. We're going to go back and inspect the project before that 18-month period ends, so that if there are some problems, we can call the bond if we need to, right? So that's what this does. The language did read 12 months when you look at the number of days and everything else, so we're just cleaning it up to 18 months.
The question I have, and it's since taking office, I've had constituents contact me, and again, it's drainage issues along their subdivision street. And we're finding more and more sinkholes as a result of failed culverts. And as we're looking into the situation, we're learning that there may have been some shortcuts or some inaccuracies in the material that was used or the way it was placed that's causing us problems with the drainage in those particular subdivisions. From your vantage point, is there more, can we do more to ensure that those situations don't continue? I mean, is there anything that 18 months is fine, but it's doubtful that in 18 months we're going to have some kind of a deterioration due to a defective culvert. And again, I also understand that making it 5 years, 10 years is onerous on the builder. I understand that as well, but is there anything that we can do to try to improve that?
We actually talked internally about modifying the road improvement districts that we now place on subdivisions. And if you know that tax that we collect from those homeowners, property owners within a subdivision that has a road improvement district that goes into a pot, we can use that pot money to repair the roads and everything else. If there's storm inlets along the street, we can likely use that because that's part of the street system. But in terms of drainage network itself, we've talked a little bit internally, and it's something we'd like to pursue, is to put drainage systems into an ordinance like that, so we can start collecting, millages from property owners within a subdivision. The legislation that we're now using for the road improvement district, the state legislation is passed by the state legislature. We'd have to go back and have that modified in order to have that happen. But I think it's something we should probably pursue. Right? And that gives us a pot of money to work from.
I fully support that action and those actions that you want to do. Any assistance you need from me, I'm sure any assistance you need from other members of this council, will gladly give it to you. And I'm sure Mr. Robert and Mr. DePatie would gladly provide their legal expertise to make this happen. But let's get that started. I've got 2 subdivisions in my district right now that are clamoring, and justifiably so, because, as Mr. Ron Savoy would tell us, it was defective culverts, and the way it was placed in those subdivisions was just inadequate.
And I'd like to add too that, we have beefed up our subdivision specifications, and so we're putting in some pretty good product now. And we have an inspector on site when all the subdivision construction is going on, so we do monitor it on a daily basis.
I know, we're beating an old drum, I understand that, but it doesn't make it any less painful for the people who live there. I
Absolutely.
appreciate it. Thank you much, Jerome.
Sure.
Mr. Lawler?
Yeah, I was gonna, kind of mention something, I just confirmed it with, Councilman Lambert here. Years ago, they were putting in metal culverts, and that's the big problem. We stopped that practice, I don't know when it was stopped, but that's the problem that we see in a lot of subdivisions. These metal culverts were just failing. And they may have been good at the time, but we stopped that practice, which is, we shouldn't have those kind of problems in newer subdivisions, we hope. That's it, thank you.
Senator, you had something for me?
So just to be clear on adopting the ordinance, Mr. Fournier had submitted some proposed changes to the exhibit after introduction. So if y'all are accepting of those changes that he made since introduction, you'll need an ordinance to adopt the ordinance with or as amended.
As amended? Okay. So at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance as amended. I have a motion by Mr. Cagnalotti, second by Mr. Lambert. Are there any other questions? Any objections?
Don't we have to do public hearing?
Pardon?
Don't we have to do public hearing?
We did.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm over here in my own world, my bad.
I am so glad somebody else is not.
It's hot in here, y'all.
It is hot, absolutely. So are there any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item M, reading of an ordinance to amend the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinances, Chapter 22, Traffic, Article 3, Watercraft, Section 22-30- No Wake Zones. Mr.
Purpose, to amend the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinances, Chapter 22, Traffic, Article 3, Watercraft, Section 22-30, No Wake Zones. Whereas the population has grown along the Amite Blind River Basin over the years, and there have been situations arise where high water events have threatened lift and property, seen this life and property. And whereas in order to mitigate some of those threats and in order to protect life and property over the past years, Ascension Parish in association with Livingston Parish has closed the waterways at times to recreational traffic based on the various conditions that have manifested. And whereas there has never been an absolute guide to those closures, which has led to much confusion to both local government as well as public. And whereas the Ascension Parish Waterway Commission has authority to make recommendations to the Parish Council, and the Parish Council has authority to act on those recommendations and to review the facts present in order to determine what is in the best interest, safety, and general welfare of the parish and amending the ordinances. And whereas it is the desire of the Ascension Parish Waterway Commission to amend the Ascension Parish Ordinance, Chapter 22, Article 3, Section 22-30, to include criteria for determining the closure of all waterways and determining when idle speed should be ordered for all waterways. Now therefore be it ordained by the Ascension Parish Governing Authority that the Code of Ordinances of Ascension Parish, Chapter 18, Political Subdivisions, Autonomous Boards, Commissions, and Authorities, Article 9, Communications District, Section 18-90 be amended to specify and mandate that commissioners be appointed from the government entities or public safety agencies as more fully described in Exhibit A attached hereto and made a part hereof. Severability, in the event that any portion of this ordinance is ever held invalid or unconstitutional for any reason by any court of competent jurisdiction over it, such portion shall be deemed a separate, distinct, and independent provision and shall not affect the validity of the remaining portions of the ordinance. Effective date, this ordinance shall be in full effect as permitted by law. The ordinance having been submitted to a vote, the vote thereon as follows.
Have a motion by Mr. Lambert, second by Mr. Cagnalotti to open the public hearing.
Motion closed.
Have a motion by Mr. Ogeron, second by Mr. Mason to close the public hearing. Chair would entertain a motion to move the ordinance.
Motion to move.
Have a motion by Mr. Mason, second by Mr. Cagnalotti to move the ordinance. Are there any questions? Any objections? Mr. Lambert.
A couple of things. This is a tri-parish effort. I'd like to also thank Wildlife and Fisheries, our own River Commission, and, several meetings, and a lot of good things came out of it, so thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item P, reading of an ordinance to amend the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinances, Chapter 9, Sale of the East Bank Sewer Utility Assets Franchise Fees.
Purpose, to amend the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinance, Chapter 9, whereas Ascension Parish is a local governmental subdivision as defined by Article 6, Section 44 of the Louisiana Constitution of 1974, and whereas Parish of Ascension is the governing and responsible body over finance and taxation, now therefore be it ordained by the Ascension Parish Governing Authority that upon completion of the sale of the East Bank Sewer Utilities assets, all franchise fees received as a result of the sale shall be dedicated for use by the Recreation Department. Effective date, this ordinance shall be full effect as permitted by law. The ordinance having been submitted to vote, the vote thereon was as follows.
Motion up a public hearing.
I have a motion by Mr. Mason, second by Mr. Lawler to open a public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing.
I have a motion by Mr. Robert, second by Mr. Lawler to close the public hearing.
Motion to move.
I have a motion by Mr. Mason to move the ordinance, second by Mr. Lawler. Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item S, reading of an ordinance to amend an ordinance adopted on October 17, 2013 for the purpose of obtaining additional funds for a youth center and rehabilitative programs in Ascension Parish. Mr. Dupaty.
Purpose, to amend an ordinance adopted by the council on the 17th day of October 2013, whereas Ascension Parish is a local governmental subdivision as defined by Article 6, Section 44 of the Louisiana Constitution of 1974, and be it ordained that the ordinance adopted by the council on the 17th day of October 2013 be amended to add the language, now therefore be it further ordained that Ascension Parish, for the purpose of obtaining additional funds for the purposes of acquiring, constructing, equipping, operating, maintaining, and managing a youth center and providing rehabilitative programs within a structured environment for children who enter the juvenile justice system or who are children in need of care or supervision, are making payments pursuant to a lease or lease purchase contract pursuant to this subpart by a two-thirds vote of total membership of the governing authority without voter approval, but only after a public hearing is held. Effective date, this ordinance shall be in full effect as permitted by law. The ordinance having been submitted to a vote, the vote thereon was as follows.
Motion to open public hearing.
Motion by Mr. Robert, second by Mr. Cagnolati to open a public hearing.
Motion to close.
Motion by Mr. Mason, second by Mr. Ogeron, to
Motion to
close the
move.
public hearing. Motion by Mr. Robert to move the ordinance. Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Motion to enter executive session.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to enter executive session. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Councilman Thomas.
Yes.
Councilman Robert.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilman Orgeron.
Yes.
Councilman Lambert.
Yes.
Councilman Lawler.
Yes.
Councilman Wagasback.
Yes.
Councilman Cagnolati.
Yes.
Councilman Mason.
Yes.
Chairwoman Casso.
Yes.
I had a free phone, man.
Chair would entertain a motion
Motion.
to... I have a motion by Councilman Mason, second by Councilman Lawler, to reconvene.
I'd like to make a motion to overturn the termination.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Ogeron. Roll call vote, Madam Secretary.
Councilman Thomas.
Yes.
Councilman Robert.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilman Orgeron.
Yes.
Councilman Lambert.
Yes.
Councilman Lawler.
Yes.
Councilman Wagasback.
Yes.
Councilman Cagnalotti.
Yes.
Councilman Mason.
Yes.
Chairwoman Casso.
Yes,
Vote 10-0.
that
Motion to adjourn?
termination is overturned. Now, the chair has a motion to adjourn by Councilman Thomas, and a second by Councilman Robert, and we are adjourned. Thank you all, and everyone have safe travels home.